All right, so there's this Buddhist monk, okay? And he's on vacation, first one of his life. Somebody paid for him, okay, because he didn't have the money. But he's checking out the sights of New York City, and he's walking around and starts a conversation with a stranger. And he's there, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm just checking out the sights. And they're like, well, you haven't experienced NYC until you've had a hot dog from a street vendor with everything on it. So the monk, later comes across a hot dog stall vendor there and goes up to him and says, yeah, I think I want a hot dog. And they're like, what do you want on it? He's like, yeah, just make me one with everything. And the vendor hands him his food, The monk gives him a $50 bill to pay for it. And the vendor says, thanks. And he moves on. Next customer, whatever. And the monk gets a little aggravated. First time he's felt that way in a while because, he's a monk. He butts in front of the other customer. He's like, hey, man, where's my change? I gave you $50 for a $5 hot dog. Where's my change? The vendor turns back to him and says, change comes from within. Okay. That's really good. All right. So on that note, we're in our series, Emotional Healthy Spirituality. Now, we believe that Jesus came to die and defeat death by raising to life again so that we can experience life and life to the fullness here today. Yes, we get to go to heaven in the future, and that's one of the greatest parts of the promise of God, but that he actually wants heaven to come invade our lives today and change us so that we can experience life to the fullness. Now, the problem is most of us only apply this truth like sunscreen, S-O-N, sunscreen, okay. Right, but we just put it on the outside parts of our life, right? For protection against the ailments of the world and to make sure we get to heaven, we cover up just enough. And it doesn't matter how liberally we are applying it to the outside part of our life. It doesn't provide all the change we need until we let Jesus come in and change things on the inside of us. 2 weeks ago, we discussed how God has given us emotions, right? That's where they came from him, and they were supposed to play a major role in our lives, even if we think they weren't supposed to. We talked about how God feels, how Jesus feels, and that it's okay for us to feel. How many of you guys have been practicing your permission to feel since we talked about it 2 weeks ago? All right, guys, this is going to be a long road for some of you. Right, how many of you guys downloaded the How We Feel app that I talked about 2 weeks ago? It's actually, this may look kind of familiar if you've been using that app, but if you want the app, you can download it right there in the corner. We'll get to this more in a second, but man, if you have been taking that time just to recognize the fact that you are feeling throughout different moments of your day and life the past couple weeks, you're well ahead of some of the other people who haven't been. Mark Brackett and his team, he wrote the book Permission to Feel that we talked about last week, and we're kind of continuing from that today. But him and his team at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, for the last couple decades, they've been observing and studying emotions and all of the aspects of it and how it is involved in our lives. And they've come up with 5 emotional skills that we need to navigate, understand, and apply emotions as tools to help us instead of just things that make us confused. All right, and so, but before we get to those skills today, because that's what we're going to be talking about, we need to lay a few foundational things, right? And the first thing in his book, Permission to Feel, Mark Brackett refers to how we need to approach emotions as being emotional scientists, not emotional judges, all right? And the main difference here is our initial response to emotions, whether it's our emotions or other people's emotions. If you're acting as an emotional judge, your first reaction to emotions that you don't understand is to deem it either good or bad, right? If you're a judge, you're like, this is good for me or this is bad for me. You may have thoughts that go through your mind that say, I can't believe I feel that way, or I can't believe that person feels that way. That's coming as a judge, not an emotional scientist. Emotional scientist comes with wonder, right? They go, I wonder why I am feeling that emotion that doesn't seem to belong. I wonder why they reacted to me that way. I wonder what's really going on under the surface, right? You come with a desire to learn and to understand instead of a desire to label immediately as good or bad, right? Emotions are real, and they're for a reason. Right? Don't judge them. Right? I know that our world and probably your upbringing came with that's a bad emotion, or that's not good for you to have that emotion. That is an untrue statement. Okay, so we have to get past that. We got to stop trying to label them as good or bad in our lives because they are tools to tell us something. It's information. We have to try to understand what they are saying to us. Also, let's set up a few basic definitions of words we're going to use, right? An emotion, things like happy, sad, or angry, they arise while we're trying to get an explanation of what's happening in the world around us or in our mind in comparison to our present goals or concerns, right? They're just things that arise for a short-lived moment, right? Nobody's felt surprised at a birthday party for like 10 hours. Right? You're surprised initially, and then the surprise wears off, and then maybe you feel joy or excitement or other things. But the emotions are normally short-lived. They usually include physiological reactions, such as maybe maybe your face blushes over, or you get chills, or your heart rate increases. Now, a feeling is our internal response to an emotion. Right? I'm angry about something that's happening. Right, and that's causing me to give up hope, so I feel hopeless, or I feel like I can't keep going this way. That's a feeling. It's nuanced, subtle. It's like multidimensional. There's a lot of things going on there. When you ask someone how they are feeling, maybe they'll respond with an emotion, but sometimes they say things like, "I feel supported," or "I feel valued," or "connected." Right? These words are not direct emotions per se, but are motivational and relationship states that come from our emotions. We often have more than one emotion at a time. It's why they are hard to communicate, because you feel just this whole mix of things, and we don't want to be vulnerable to begin with. And you're like, if I share one, I got to share these others, so I'm just going to say I'm fine, right? Consider the belts moving announcement that they made a few weeks ago, right? There's a lot of emotions happening in this room, but probably a lot of emotions happening in you if you've had any amount of relationship with them or just the knowledge that they've been here serving us, right? You might have had surprise and sadness, right? Maybe shock, maybe anger. Maybe you felt proud that they're moving on in life to things, maybe nostalgic because you start thinking of all the memories that you've had with them, right? We have all of these emotions happening at once from one thing that's happened. And until we slow down, often it just feels like a mess, right? Until you really get into your feeling and give yourself permission to feel, do you understand all those things that are happening inside of you? What's even crazier is we often feel emotions because of emotions. Those are called meta-emotions. Like you begin feeling afraid of something, and then you feel embarrassed because you feel afraid, right? No, that's only me. Okay, right? Meta-emotions, it's great, right? It's like the Lord really loved us, so. He's like, if you thought that was confusing, let's throw in another layer. And then the last term that we often use that's kind of similar to emotions and feelings is our mood. Now, our mood is more diffused. It's less intense than an emotion. It's just kind of a state of being. It usually lasts a lot longer. There's harder to define our mood, like specifically what caused it, because it's usually a handful of different emotions that we've had over time that have moved us into a mood to be in. Now, it is, again, tied to our emotional responses of life and things, but it's longer lasting than an emotion. Okay, so I just want you, as we move forward in talking about these things, to have a basic understanding of the different ways to explain what's going inside of you, because later we'll find that that's really important. So the 5 skills that we have to learn to be able to use our emotions as tools to help us grow and move forward in life instead of emotions as things that are confusing and hold us back are found in the acronym of the word ruler. Okay, the first R stands for recognize, right? Recognizing the occurrence of an emotion, right? Not recognizing the emotion specifically yet. That comes down the road a little bit. First, we just need to recognize that there's been an emotional change that's happening within us. Maybe it's your thoughts, maybe it's your energy all of a sudden changing. If you're looking at somebody else, maybe it's a major change in their facial expression or their body language or their voice. That's our first clues that something important is happening, and we need to recognize that there's an emotion that is now playing a part of whatever is happening, whether it's in you or in a relationship. Right, so how are you feeling? Right now, I just want you to pause and take a deep breath. Right, turn off your mind that's trying to make it analytical and figure it out, right? We're not here to judge, we're just here to feel. Right, don't worry about the words to explain it, just you're feeling things, right? We start with in this exact moment right now, what is my emotional state? Right? Am I feeling up? Am I feeling down? Am I feeling pleasant or unpleasant? Right? There's physical cues that help us there, right? Am I depleted or am I energized? Am I relaxed or am I tense? Is my heart racing or is it calm? All right, when was the last time you just paused to recognize that you even have all these emotions going on inside of you? Now, just think of this. If we aren't so great at pausing to recognize the emotions that are in our lives, we're probably not doing great at recognizing that there are emotions happening in other people's lives that are affecting our relationships. Right? When was the last time you asked someone, what's your basic underlying emotional state right now? Yeah, probably never, right? But that is what we need to figure out when what we're trying to understand when we're in relationships with other people, right? Ask that question to your barista next time you're not ordering the venti so that you can give commissions. Right, we need to recognize in us and in every other human being, right, from our children to our friends, our enemies, to our coworkers, our bosses, to our leaders in our lives, to our peers, that we all have an emotional state that we are communicating from. And that emotional state is not stable. It's not always the same. It changes throughout the day, not even just every other day or so. It's constantly changing, and we need to begin to understand that. This is critical because most people don't start with sharing that kind of info in words, right? You're like, hey, your boss comes up to you, to ask you to do a task, but first he's like, what's your underlying basic emotion right now so I can understand how you're going to respond to me? Like, that would be really nice, because you're like, well, honestly, it's been a rough day. I'm really frustrated, so I will respond short. I'm not excited that you're asking me to do more things, but imagine that kind of communication. Right? Like, that's really what we're trying to do without the words, and maybe we need to start with the words. I can imagine a lot of my conversations with my wife going a lot better if we started there, right? And that's not saying for her, that's saying that's for me, okay? And because Noah just made it sound really bad. Also, sometimes our outward words or our outward actions express something that's opposite of what our emotion needs, right? We can be hurt and angry, and what we need is support in understanding that we aren't alone, but our emotions show ourselves as hostile. Or we maybe even hide behind the words, just get out, leave me alone right now, when really that's not what you need. Maybe it's just hiding behind, it's fine, it's all fine, everything's fine. Now, recognition starts at the basics of understanding emotion. Right? One of the crazy things about emotions right now is it's still, it's such new research that pretty much every book or article you pick up to read about emotions describes emotions differently. They all have the same kind of basic definition per each one, but how they divide them up or try and organize or categorize or decide how many emotions do we really have versus what we don't have, everybody kind of differs still on that. Now, so I just want to let you know that if you go look in other places, you may find a different way that people have categorized it. And I've chosen this one mostly because I really like their app. But I like how this one plays out. I think it's just simple to start with. And so James Russell, he's a professor at Boston College. He said that all emotions have two core properties, or two dimensions to them. They have energy and they have pleasantness. And there's a chart that you can put up on the screen. Yeah. Which looks like the chart that you have in front of you. This is made by James Russell and a couple other people. And if you look at it, there's, the two categories here, right? You have low pleasantness going this way and high pleasantness this way, and low energy going, down and high energy going up. And so that's why we started it. When you begin to understand how am I feeling, you can really start with those two questions, right? Am I in a pleasant mood? Am I not in a pleasant mood? Do I have a lot of energy or do I feel really depleted? And then you can narrow down to, a quadrant there to begin looking at maybe how you are feeling. Right, we have the top right corner, it's yellow. These are high levels of pleasantness and energy. Now, some of the physical things that could cue you to this or cue other people are in that area is people's posture is very erect, and their eyes are wide, they're excited to take on life in front of them, they're energized. When you see someone like that, they're probably in the yellow category. Now, on the top left, we have red, which is low pleasantness and high energy. This is where your body is tense, or somebody's body looks really tense. Their breath is shallow, they're breathing fast, their heart is pumping fast, maybe your heart's beating fast. Their eyebrows are raised or furrowed because they're trying to be focused. Right, the moment right before fight or flight kind of spot. Adrenaline's pumping. Right, that's red. Now, on the bottom right, we have green. This is your high, pleasant, low energy. Body is at ease. You're breathing slowly. Gentle facial features because you're just calm. You're really relaxed because you feel safe and secure. Right? So when you see that in people, you're like, oh, okay, they're probably over here. Then bottom left, we have blue, which is low pleasant and low energy. This is when people, maybe their gaze is looking down. They don't want to make eye contact. Their shoulders are kind of slumped forward. If it's you, maybe you feel like retreating or hiding. Maybe they're even voicing like, I just want to hide from everything going on. Maybe even a major way to tell if people are in this category is they're searching out other people to comfort because they actually want comfort. And you can kind of share in comfort when you're comforting someone else. Now, we cannot solely rely on our instinctual sense to tell us everything we need to know about ourselves or others from that, right? This may give us a start, but there's a major difference between some of those words in the same category up there, right? Somebody who's feeling concerned about something is very different than the person who's livid about something, right? Now, they may be showing similar things in their body posture and things, but those would be possibly caused by two totally different events in their lives. And so we need to not jump to a conclusion on which one they are in that category, but it may help direct us on how to ask the right questions to understand. Right? We easily misidentify people without the proper understanding. Philippians 4:6 says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. And then verse 7 goes, then he will give you peace. Right, Matthew 11:28 is another similar verse of Jesus saying, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Sometimes we struggle to do this because we don't take time to realize that we are heavy burdened, right? That we are carrying that weight on us that we're not ready for. So we don't take everything to God in prayer because we're avoiding it, because we haven't really sat in our feelings to understand, oh, I'm not doing so well, or I want to pray about the joy that I'm feeling and take that to God too. Right? And we miss taking everything to him because we are not taking time to be aware of everything going on inside of us. Right? How do we take it to God in prayer when we don't even know why we are feeling the way that we are, let alone what we're feeling? Which leads us to skill number 2. The U of the word ruler is understand. This is considered the most challenging of the emotion skills to acquire because this is where real work actually begins. Here's where we decide whether we even want to wish to understand what's going on, right? What maybe has caused us to feel this way or to decide somebody else's feelings, right? This is the moment that you decide whether you're going to dig into it or you're going to put it in the box, seal it shut, put it in the storage room and say, we'll check it out another time, like that box that's still sealed up in your storage room at home when you moved and you said, I'll get to it in a week or so. It's been like 10 years and it's still never been opened. I'm not sure what's scarier, right? Opening your own box or opening somebody else's to understand what's going on in there. We don't always know what's going to emerge or what we're going to find out when we dig deeper. How is it going to affect us? And am I willing to do something about it? All right, especially when it comes to somebody else. Now, all this drama in that is triggered by the word why, right? Why this feeling? Why now? Understanding emotions begins when we start to answer those types of questions. Why do you or why do I feel that way? What is the underlying reason for this feeling? What is causing it? Right? And it's probably complex. It's probably deep, especially with like the other meta emotions and the other memories that are probably causing us to have that feeling. Sometimes we're afraid to understand somebody else's emotions because there's a possibility the why might be our fault. Right? So we don't want to ask, why are you feeling that way? Because it may come pointed back to you. And that would reveal that we aren't good people. And so that's why I gave you those stickers today, to remind you that we've got a long way to go to get there. When trying to understand somebody else's emotions, especially kids, And those close to us, we can often be at fault, or their emotions might be directed towards us or because of us, right? Think of your child saying, I hate you, when maybe they're just dealing with embarrassment because of something you said or did, or a way you did something that you don't even know that you did. But it's really not anger. It's not really hate that they're feeling. They just don't know how to express it. And until we dig a little bit deeper into understanding why, to come out like, oh, that's something that I could have fixed or not done, right? But we have to be careful to not retaliate those responses, right? But to stay calm and help them uncover what's going on deeper. As we learn in recognizing, we could possibly have a heads up into what people are feeling, like what quadrant they are in. But sometimes articulating the differences between the emotions inside are not as easy. That's where these questions come in to help us get it narrowed down. Proverbs 14:15 says, the simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps. Sometimes our feelings on the surface level can lead us astray if we don't ask why, if we don't dig deeper. It's like, oh, I'm just angry about this, so you want to respond in anger, but really, maybe it's not anger at all. And until you really ask the questions to figure out what is happening, we may be responding totally wrong. Questions to ask yourself are things like, what just happened? What was I doing before this happened? What might have caused my feelings or this reaction? Maybe what happened this morning or what happened last night that might be involved in me feeling this way? What has happened before with this person that may be connected? What memories do I have of this place or this situation? Maybe there's past struggles in the same place, and when you show up there, emotions immediately come involved and then begin to make you react in wrong ways. Right? When helping someone else, you can add these type of questions, right? What usually makes you feel this way? Right? Because maybe you don't know all the things of your life, but hey, have you felt this way before, and what caused it then? Who were you with when you started feeling this way? Another really good thing is just, what do you think you need right now? Because if they can respond in what they need, then that helps you pinpoint what they're feeling. Behavior during this process can be telling, but we have to be careful to not take things personally. Right? Remember to stay an emotional scientist, not a judge, right? Not to, well, I can't believe you would feel that way, or I can't believe, that's not a correct way to feel about this situation. Right? We need to stay a scientist. Now, at some point in this process, we need to feel as though we've answered that original why. Right? If you stop short because you're like, I feel like I've dug deep enough today, you may never really understand that emotion, and it'll probably come again, because that's what happens. Sometimes, granted, it takes a lot of bravery to dig into that investigation all the way to the end. And so when you have genuine motivation to dig into that understanding of that why, it empowers us to become better friends, better family members, better students, colleagues, partners, better church members, when we're willing to dig into people and say, yeah, but why are you feeling that way? The next skill is the letter L of ruler, and it's of labeling. Our language for our emotions is really not great. There are hundreds of words to describe our feelings, but we usually stick to the ones we like fine, good, busy. The question at the core of this is, how are you feeling? Now, we don't get very far if we don't have any useful answers. We know from neuroscience and brain imaging research that there's real tangible truth to the profession that if you can name it, you can tame it. Have you guys heard that phrase before? You may have noticed that each one of these steps so far just narrows it down a little bit more. You're like, first you recognize I am feeling something, right? And maybe it's in this quarter. Then you begin to ask the why questions to dig a little bit deeper. Well, this brings it down as narrow as you can be, to hopefully get us the exact emotions that we're feeling. But when we don't have the words to describe that emotional feeling, then it's really hard for us to express it and to move on. Because labeling is the hinge point or the pivot point in the ruler process. It connects the recognition and understanding to then expressing and regulating. And until you label it, you won't be able to express or regulate that emotion. Labeling our emotions with precise words does four main things. It legitimizes and organizes our experiences. When we attach a word to a feeling, it gives emotion substance and creates a mental model of the word, which means it can be compared to other feelings we have or also with other people's feelings. It helps others to be able to meet our needs when we can express it with a label. Once we're able to communicate what's going on with specificity, what we're feeling, the people in our lives can look beyond our behaviors, right, and our actions and what's going on and see the cause. And then empathy is available, right? Because sometimes our actions or our response to things almost shuts us down from having empathy for people. But when we hear the underlying causes of what's going on, that's when empathy lights back up in us. And when we can't express it, then it's hard to expect other people to have empathy towards us. That then leads to the third thing, which helps us meet the needs of others, right? Once we know how someone is feeling, it's easier for us to support them. And lastly, it connects us with the rest of our world, right? Our emotions become a form of communication. It's a way to share in the experience of being alive when you can express, I have been there before and I've felt those things and this is how I'm feeling now. Did you know that there are around 2,000 words in the English language that broadly refer to emotion? 2,000. Did you, Brene Brown, and I'm pulling this from memory, and so it's maybe not correct, but she surveyed a lot of people. I want to say it was like 65,000 people. And they just said, write down all the words that you know that are emotions. And on average, people listed 3. Not happy, sad, mad. That was all they had. Right? There's 2,000 words in the English language. And then there's words outside of our language that express emotions that we don't have words for. There's that many ways to be talking about how we feel and what's going on. We have 50% of those words roughly are negative, right? The pleasant or low pleasant words, 30% positive, and 20% kind of neutral. What's crazy, we have so many words for negative emotions, but we don't want to use them because we don't want to be seen as bad. The power of it lessens the more, sorry, I jumped 2 different sentences. We would really like to, if our negative emotions just went away on their own, right? We don't want to label it as negative because we just want it to disappear. And so we don't want to say that's something that's actually going on inside of me, so we don't label things. But research projects have shown that once we label the emotion, the power of it lessens, and the more we're back in control. Right? Labeling causes us to not act aggressive or poorly in response to negative emotions. Instead, it allows us to be able to regulate them and respond correctly. If you remember, our emotions are just tools. They're just trying to alert us of something going on. And so once we recognize it and label it, our brain's literally like, oh, good, that emotion's done its job, and it lessens it until it needs to bring it back up again. But when we just try to ignore it and be like, it'll go away on its own, it doesn't go away because our brain is like, they haven't recognized it yet. They haven't recognized it, and they just keeps pushing it forward. And usually it builds and gets worse. I'm sure none of you have experienced that before. So many studies have found that the more we can pinpoint our feelings and the why behind it and put it into the words, the easier it becomes to process and deal with it. This is called emotional granularity. You'll see that out there in all the emotional studies, just making it really specific to the best that you can of how you feel. Because this is, when we label something, it becomes real, right? When we're not labeling it, we're ignoring it. Right? It doesn't exist or whatever, right? It's why when you, if all of you guys, I'm sure, were raised on a farm, and so they tell you not to name your animals because it's harder to kill them, because it's a real thing. It's like a pet now if it's got a name, and so it's similar. Like when you name your emotion, it gives it something. It becomes real. And so now you have to handle it, you have to process it, you have to take care of it. So this is where this chart comes in real handy, right? It gives you more language to help explain what you're feeling. In the app that's there, it's How You Feel. It's made by the same people who made this chart here, and actually has more words to choose from, which are like, great, more choices. But what's nice about in the app is if you click on the word, it gives you like a 1-sentence definition. And I've actually found, I've been using the app for like 3 weeks now, that it's so helpful for me to be able to label how I'm feeling about things, to be able to read that little 1-sentence definition and be able to be like, yeah, that's exactly how I'm feeling right now. And I would say almost just recognizing it and labeling it literally almost diminishes how I'm feeling in that and dwelling in it by like 80% or something. I'm not, like, it literally just changes in that moment. And so I encourage you guys to, at a minimum, do that with the chart. It's also been really helpful in my prayer time each morning, because now when I go to Jesus, I say, this is what I'm feeling. This is exactly what's going on inside of me, and I need help here, right? Or I want whatever is causing this, I'm ready to give that exact thing over to you so that you can take my heavy burdens, right, and give me that yoke to carry me through with you through the rest of things. Man, I think when we really aren't sure, we're not honest where our heaviness comes from, so we don't actually ever take it off and hand it over to God, because how could we? We don't know what it is. Right? When we don't have a label for it, how can we actually take everything to God in prayer and exchange it for peace? Right? As Philippians 4 tells us. Man, when we settle for the 6 or 7 words, or maybe just the 3 words that you have to describe what's going on inside of you, you're shortchanging yourself. You're basically taking a vow of emotional poverty for the rest of your life to say, this is all I'm ever going to be able to feel, and I'll really never understand the fullness of life. So try coming up with as many words, as thoughtful and as precise as you can when you're trying to figure out what's going on. Without it, we remain unknown as people to one another. And I would say God knows us on the fullness, but because we're unknown to ourselves, then we don't know how to express our life to God. Which takes us to E. E is for expressing emotions. So the first 3 parts of the rule are about the inner experience of emotions. Digging deep into feelings is not always easy, but it's easier than sharing them with people, right? Because it stays inside your head. You're like, it's just here, that's fine. But we really have to be able to express it to move forward, and there's some external risk there, right? So the question to ask once you've labeled this is, who or should I even share this? Right? I would say you can always share it with God. And you should probably start there every time. But then when you start thinking about people around you, and you say, can I share this? And the answer is yes. Then you have to consider, how much do I share, and when, and where, and with who? Like, should I share this information? That step definitely involves feeling a little bit brave, and you're definitely going to have to be vulnerable to be able to share what's going on inside of you. How many of you would say right now that you are on the high pleasantness side, right? The yellow or the green quadrant right now? He's real energized. Right? Okay. How many of you are on the other side? Just what I thought. Okay. That's funny. How many of you guys just don't feel, it looks like? Most of you. Okay. Good thing we're on this series here for you guys. It's crazy. So the guy, Mark Brackett, who wrote this book, he goes around and he speaks at all these conferences all the time. And one of the questions he always asks is that, who feels on the high pleasant side? And he said, majority of people always raise their hand to saying, I'm on the high pleasant side. But when he has all the same people send in anonymous surveys of how they're really feeling, and majority of people are actually on the other side. Right? But we have a bias of not wanting to be seen as bad or as negative, so we don't admit that. We're not vulnerable people, and that's where life change happens, especially in church. Guys, our core value here is to be authentic, and when you're not willing to share what's really going on inside of you, you are not even at the beginning stages of being authentic, right? And so we have to be able to get there, and this has to be a safe place where we can express emotions. Now, sharing and expressing our emotions is saying things like this: here's what I feel and why. Right? And we have to include the why, and that usually leads us to being more vulnerable, because we have to admit probably a fault of something going on in our lives, or a miscue or something that happened in our lives. Saying things like, here's what I need to happen next in my life. Here's what I need from you right now. If you're expressing to the person that maybe has caused it, or to your wife or your best friend. Right? And that information is probably some of the most intimate information you'll probably ever express to people. Because it's really hard to say, I need something, first off. Even harder to go deeper and say why you need it. And like I said, I've had the How We Feel app for a while, and I shared it with some friends to see how how they felt about it and different things too. And I was in the app one day, and I picked something, I don't remember what it was, but something that was sad, like low pleasant side, because that's how I was feeling that morning. And somebody reached out and said, hey, I saw that you are feeling this way. Care to share what's going on or anything? And my initial response is to be like, no, it's all fine. Right? Like, it's been an hour, it's all better, life's great, and just move on. And I literally, because they texted me, I started texting, no, it's all good. And I'm like, that's a straight up lie. I'm not being real, I'm not being vulnerable. And so I deleted it and went back and said, no, like there's just a lot of problems going on and some things I'm trying to resolve today and just a lot of things on my mind from that. And then they literally responded with, well, what do you need? Is there anything I can do to help? And to which I wanted to say, no, it's all good, because that's what we do, right? That's who we were created to be, it feels like, built up to be. But so I had to pause again, and it was like, okay, no, I do need something. And that was just it. I just needed to feel supported, right? That I wasn't alone in trying to make these decisions and things. I just needed to feel that I could make this decision. I could make it forward. And they responded with some encouragement and literally changed my day, my trajectory of things. And until we're willing to be vulnerable, we're just going to be stuck in those places often because God created us for one another and we need each other. We need the gifts that each other have in our lives to be able to move forward and get past some of these things that are going on in our lives. And without expressing it, we'll never get there. Now, it is a skill. It's something we have to learn to do. Scientifically, this has been titled emotional labor. That sounds great, right? We all love more work. And right? It's literally the effort or the work required to manage the way we express our feelings. We do this all the time, right? It's not a new thing you'll have to learn. You just have to learn how to do it better because you have been trying to regulate your emotions since you were born. You have been constantly in the emotional labor of, do I share this? Do I not share it? And most of us work harder to not share than probably the work it would take to share. Now, I want to be clear in this category here that yes, you have permission to feel every emotion, everything that's going on inside of you. But that does not give you a license to let it out in unhealthy ways, okay? Whining, yelling, acting on emotional impulses, freaking out, gossiping, verbal, physical aggression, just disappearing, not following through with your responsibilities. Now, this doesn't mean fake it, right? That's not what I'm saying. Your emotions are real, but your emotions are not there to control you. Right? They are tools to help you. They are information that is trying to share to you. So don't go home and open your mouth about everything and let it out like a madman or mad woman and then wonder why you didn't fix everything. You're like, my kids, they're hiding under the beds. My husband's finally doing that chore list that I gave him forever ago, Right? There's an appropriate time and place, the right people, and the right way to discuss things. And we're going to talk about conflict resolution and things here down the road as well. But and you also just don't go and hide from everything. All the things that you know you should be doing, or the things that the people you know you need to be around and stuff, just because you have feelings, it shouldn't lead you to hide from everything. If emotions are keeping you from living your life, then you definitely have some work to do in this area. Right? Some of you live life with emotions as your handlebar of your bike. Right? On the bike ride of life, your emotions are steering you wherever they want you to go. But emotions are supposed to keep us from tipping over. They're more like training wheels of your bike. They don't steer you, they don't control you, they just alert you that you're about to tip over. Right? That your life's getting a little out of balance or something is happening. Right? We are supposed to be able to control how we react to the information that our emotions are telling us. We're not here to be controlled by our emotions. Ephesians 4:25-27 says, so stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body. First off, let's just start there, right? When somebody asks, how are you doing? Don't tell lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth because we are part of the same body. Right? I mean, how messed up would your arm got chopped off and your brain's just like, nah, we're just going to ignore that that's a thing. I'm not going to tell you to freak out, get to the ER, because whatever. Or if your hand was just like, yeah, we got some problems, but don't tell the rest of the body. They'll never know. Right? We know, guys. That's usually why we go, how are you feeling? Right? Because your body is telling us things, right? And so don't lie. Tell your neighbors the truth. Secondly, verse 26 says, and don't sin by letting your anger control you. Right? It's not sin by being angry. Right? Because anger is just a feeling. It's a tool. It's information. But the issue is when we let it control us. Right? Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil because it could cause us to do things we don't want to do because we let it control us. Right? It literally says, don't let emotion control you to the point of sin, or Sin, we've talked about this before, is just meaning missing the mark. Like God has a path for you to stay on, and when we sin, it's getting off of his path. So don't let emotions take you off of the path that God has for you. Expression doesn't always even need to be face-to-face or spoken. Sometimes it could just be journaling, right? Or creative writing or songwriting or different things to get it out. Now, expression is also a co-skill. Like tennis, you really can't do it alone. I've tried. It's very boring. Whoa, that was loud. And, right, because the problem here is that when you're expressing emotions and the listener is not doing very good at their part of listening, it's unlikely that anything useful will come of it. Right? Have you ever been like expressing the depth of your heart? Like the real feelings that you look up and you see that person's just like scrolling Facebook or Instagram. Right? Maybe they've just been staring out the window daydreaming, and then you start throwing in weird things. Like, this is what I do when people aren't listening to me. I realize they're not, and then I'm like, then a dinosaur, it took my leg off. And, I had to fly a helicopter the first time in my life to get to the hospital, all by myself. It was pretty crazy. I only killed a few people, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, what? And they've been nodding along this whole time. They're like, yeah, I hear you, man. That sounds tough. Now, we often, and it's even gotten worse now that we have phones, right? But we often send signals of indifference to others. One of the things that I need to go back through, but at one time I turned off basically every notification coming to my watch, because when I get a notification and I'm like in a meeting or I'm talking with someone, like it's just habitual for my arm to come up and me to look at it, and people immediately go, oh, I'm sorry, am I taking up too much of your time? Right? And I'm not trying to convey that, but that's something that people are reading from me, and then all of a sudden I'm not being that in-depth listener. Now they've been thinking, oh, you're trying to get out of here, you got something else to do, you're not really listening to what I have going on. Right? It's even more so if you have your phone out, sitting on the table, face up. Some crazy number, like 80% of people assume that when you have your phone face up that you're not paying attention to them. Even if it's not even in your hand, because it looks like you're waiting for that message to come from so-and-so or want to watch the time or whatever going on. We have to consider those type of things when people are wanting to share everything going on. Are we being good listeners? Even on the listening side, we need to remember that we are scientists and not judges, right? And some of you need to tell your face that you're a scientist and not a judge. So it says something, you're like, what? It's like not being a good scientist right now, yeah. So stay calm, right? Try your best to not react to things. It was really hard and sometimes, but be a non-anxious presence. I've talked about this book a few times before, but basically that just means like to be a safe place, like a place that's not going to give them more anxiety, but a place where they can unload things going on. That means open body language, eye contact, listening to hear and understand, not just trying to respond. Right? How many of you just listen and you're immediately thinking, this is how I'm going to respond to that. This is how I can help them. Right? Like that's not being a good listener, and it's really hard. And it's okay to hear them all the way out. It's okay for there to be silence, right? After they express everything, then consider taking some time and figuring out how you want to respond. And probably respond with a question, right? Not advice, not ways to fix things right away. Help them dig deeper, right? And definitely don't respond at a judgment. Okay, like, well, holy cow, that's crazy. It's not what they're needing at that time. James 1:19 says this, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must all be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry. Right? When someone's expressing emotions, be slow to speak and quick to listen to them. Right? And do not let their emotions drive you to anger, even if you're involved, but hear them out. Right, there's this saying that like God's given you one mouth and 2 ears, so you listen twice as much. He's given you 10 fingers, so you tickle 10 times as much. But when Romans 12:15-16 says, be happy with those who are happy. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people. And don't think you know it all. Feel with others, not try and fix others. Right? That's what we're called to do. Expression doesn't affect just our emotional lives. There's abundant research that getting our emotions out of us physically brings health to our bodies. Things like keeping secrets actually makes people ill. Right? Trying to hold things in too much makes people ill. Significant drops in doctor visits from people who express their emotions regularly, an increase in your immune function, lower blood pressure, long-term improvement in mood, reduction in stress. College students have higher grades when they have a safe place to express how they're feeling. Your employees miss less work when they have a safe place to express their feelings. Scripture in multiple places talks about how everything hidden will come to light. Sometimes it explodes out of us. You ever been there like, no, it's fine, everything's fine. And then just one day it's just like, all the things. If you don't bring it out, it will come out and it will be inconvenient. Like every time. So ponder these questions about your expression. Right? What emotions do you show most at home or at work? Are they what you are really feeling or just what you feel allowed to show? How would those closest to you rate your expression skills? Are you comfortable expressing emotions in all the quadrants or just the good ones? How much emotional labor are you putting in every day? Right, first, we got to give ourselves and others permission to feel. Accept and acknowledge that there's no shame in expressing our emotions correctly. Right, that's a real thing going on inside of you. We don't need to fix or hide what we feel, but that doesn't mean that the actions that we want to do because of that are appropriate. Expression enhances our lives in many ways. Not all of them obvious, but it propels us forward. And that brings us to our last step. Right, what do we do now that we know that we're feeling something? We understand the why behind it. We've labeled it as accurate as we can, and we've expressed it to the right people. We can now begin to regulate it. That last R is for regulate. Emotion regulation is the top of the ruler hierarchy, right? It's like the most complex of the 5 skills and the most challenging to do. It's nearly impossible to imagine what life would look like without the power to regulate our emotions. Again, this is one of those things you've done your whole life. You just may not have done it well because we constantly have emotions and we're constantly trying to regulate them. Sometimes we do it properly, other times it's just a knee-jerk reaction. We want to be able to take these unconscious actions and move them to conscious choices, right, based off those other 4 skills. There's not just things that are happening to us, but we are choosing for them to happen. The Stanford University professor James Gross defines emotional regulation as the process by which individuals influence which emotions they have, when they have them, and how they experience and express these emotions. The number of specific strategies to regulate your emotions are nearly limitless, so we're going to take the rest of your life to talk about them today. Right? Because they depend on every situation that's unique to who you are and the emotions you are feeling uniquely to them. Not everybody experiences the same thing the same ways. So strategies that work for you may not work for someone else. And the ones that work for you today may not even work tomorrow. Some of these strategies are long-term fixes. Others are just Band-Aids till you can get to a safe place to deal with them appropriately. And as we talked about 2 weeks ago, we don't really have one emotion at a time. There are not really lulls between our emotions. We're just having a less energized emotion. Right? Our feelings like a river, always in motion. We know people who seem particularly unskilled at regulating their emotions, right? They're easily knocked off course by how they feel. They routinely overreact in unhelpful ways. On the other extreme, we know people that suppress emotional responses so much that they just seem numb and cold to all of life happening around them. The initial goal of regulation is to manage our own emotional responses. Now, this skill gets more complex with co-regulation, with relationships we have, because every human reaction we have ever had from a baby until today involves co-regulation. We are influenced by the emotions of others, and we have to be able to regulate that as well. Now, there are 4 categories of emotional regulation. The first is what they call mindful breathing. Mindful breathing has endless benefits. We've talked about this before of what it means to like meditate on scripture and how good it is for you. We've talked about how different emotions cause physiological reactions, such as our hearts beginning to race or the stress hormones being poured into our brain, and mindful breathing counteracts those things. Those reactions allows us to think and feel more clearly. It even just lessens the feelings so that we can move on. It's even better when we take that time to meditate on Jesus. Isaiah 26:3 says, "You will keep in perfect peace all those who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." Psalm 55:22 says, "Give your burdens to the Lord, and he will take care of you. He will not permit the godly to slip and fall." Right, the very first step of every step you take is taking it to God, right? To invite him into these feelings and what's going on. Right, in Matthew 11:28, it says he'll put his yoke on you, which means him and you will be tied together and he will walk through this thing with you. Right? I don't want to try and process this without God. Second category is forward-looking strategies. These require a decent amount of self-awareness and self-knowledge. If you know things that set you off, that give you the negative emotions or the things that bring you joy, you can plan in advance how to deal with them. Just often knowing that you have a plan to handle the things that bring you anxiety lessens the anxiety. Maybe you're dreading that family get-together, and you go through ruler, why am I dreading this? Why am I feeling this way? And you realize that, your aunt always bothers you with questions you don't like answering. And so you decide, you know what? Wherever she sits, I'll just sit on the opposing side of the table so I don't have to answer her questions, right? Knowing that you've kind of solved part of that problem will literally alleviate the emotions that you're feeling. Maybe you have a one-on-one meeting that you need to have with someone, but in the thought of having that meeting is overwhelming you. So you just keep putting it off and pushing it off to the future. But someone mentions, why don't we meet as a group? And you're like, that does sound better. All of a sudden, that anxiety, that overwhelm is gone. Now, avoidance is part of this strategy. Avoiding things is not always wise. And it's definitely hardly ever a long-term solution. Right? Maybe it can be long-term if it's, someone you don't have any sort of relationship with. Like maybe there was a rude cashier one time and you're like, I'm just never going to go through their line at the grocery store again. Boom, that's fine, right? Ephesians 4, that verse that says, "Do not sin in your anger," is actually quoting Psalm 4:4 that says, "Don't sin by letting anger control you. Think about it overnight and remain silent." Right? He's literally saying, stay quiet and avoid it for a time. Right? It's okay to avoid things that are setting you off so that you can get to a spot where you can think clearly about it. This also involves seeing man, I got a really hard work week, or I have a bunch of meetings this week that are going to drain me. You know what? I'm going to plan for something fun on Saturday. And that feeling of joy, knowing you have something that you're excited about happening, will counteract some of the negative emotions and help you regulate your emotions throughout the week. The third category is attention-shifting strategies. These take many forms, but are based on the same principle that we can temper the impact of our emotion by diverting our attention from it. Again, usually not healthiest of options, but good for a short term until you can get to the opportunity to fix it. This could be as simple as looking away from stressful encounters, right? Or reflective as delivering yourself a self-talk as though you're speaking to a friend under duress to help divert your attention to something better. We distract ourselves from our emotions a lot. Usually it's scrolling social media, playing mindless games on our phones, daydreaming about being somewhere better, or how things could be. That's a form of this as well. Binge watching Netflix so you don't have to think about the test results you're waiting on. The list of distractions is really endless, right? Hanging out with friends so you don't have to be alone with your thoughts, or drugs. That's where they come into this. Again, not always good choices. Snacks, naps, procrastination, that's all in this category. Often when we say people are living in denial, they're avoiding their emotions, this is what they have chosen to do to regulate their emotions. We sometimes even distract ourselves with God. Sometimes this can be really good, right? If we decide to set aside some time and have some mindful time with him, and we're focused on him, and we're spending time with him. But sometimes we just put a lot of God activity into our lives so that we can avoid dealing with what he actually wants us to deal with. Self-talk, like I said, can be really helpful here. They say that if you address yourself by name, and you stay in that third person form, which is kind of weird, but it causes you to be nicer, right? How many of you guys have been like, you idiot, about talking about yourself? Okay, just me. No, you idiot, why'd you do that? Why'd you raise your hand? No. But you wouldn't say that to somebody else, like for those same situations. So when you address yourself by name, it tricks your brain and think you're talking to somebody else, so you're actually nicer to yourself. And then that comforts our brain. We're simple people, guys. But as a Christian, this is what it's like when you say, this is what God says about you to yourself. I think you're a child of God, Andrew. Right? You are perfectly made in my image, Andrew. Like, weird, but good. Okay? You don't have to say it out loud. Find a soundproof room somewhere. But when you say those things, especially what God speaks over you, it literally transforms, again, how your brain is thinking. And helps you to, then add on taking the specific burdens to him and expressing that gets it off of you. The fourth category is cognitive reframing strategies. This is also known shortly as reappraisal. It's the ability to reframe situations in a positive light and react to the positive side instead of the negative side. Right? If someone treats you rudely at a store or a driver in traffic, you can react as angry, or you could reframe. Maybe those people are having a worse day than me. So instead you feel empathetic, right? Instead of angry. Having anxiety before a big test or an important meeting could make you feel worse. But we learned 2 weeks ago that anxiety actually really helps us focus better, right? And now you can reframe that anxiety as a positive thing. Oh, I'm glad I'm feeling that way because I need that focus for this test. Now, we do have to be careful and stay realistic. Right? We can let that ability of reframing things cause us to just ignore bad things happening to us and stay in bad relationships or stay involved in a situation longer than we need to. So we need to be aware of, like, are we actually getting better? Does the same thing keep happening? And maybe make some changes in our lives. Right? When it comes to reappraisal, we have to ask ourselves, am I doing this simply to justify avoiding a difficult, sensitive problem? Am I doing this because I know that addressing the issue is going to lead to a long, torturous conversation? Right? In that case, reappraisal may be good for a short-term solution. It's not the right time or the right place, but not good for long-term. Now, after we regulate any of our emotions using these categories, we have to ask ourselves, well, that may have worked for now, but what did it accomplish for me in the long run? Because remember, the goal of regulation is not to get rid of the ability to feel. Right? We go through all this, and I know a lot of people's thoughts were like, oh man, I can't wait to just not have to feel those things anymore. Like that, you're missing the whole point. Like, you will feel, we just need to learn how to respond to them appropriately. Right? We need to understand it, not let it control us. But if the same feeling keeps coming up in the same situations, maybe you need to take a physical change in that situation. Right? Not just make yourself numb to it, or not just try and keep avoiding it or regulating it some other way. Now, here's the real problem. Right, you guys now have all the skills that you need to handle these things. And after introducing these tools to help regulate our reactions to our emotions, studies show that most people who learn these skills do not use them when they need them most. It's rough. It's a rough life out there, guys. Right, when emotions run high, all the training goes out the door. So Dragon, my dog that I had, passed away last year, but she was a really, really good dog when there was nothing going on around her, okay? We lived in an apartment building and had a bunch of dogs, and she would just, like, lose her mind around any other dog. Every skill, every training thing we've ever done, she just forgot it all. And we even had, like, this local dog whisperer guy who's like, I can train anybody. I tried to work on our kids. But he came and he tried to work on Dragon and he gave up. Like, he was like, I don't know what's happening. They're like, if you can get her to do these tricks alone, it'll be able to get her to do those things. And she could, like, nail all those things. But if another dog was around, everything goes out the window. And some of us do that with our emotions, right? We if we're by ourselves, we can process, we can regulate, we can do all these things, but we get into a high tense situation, and it's just like everything's out of our brain, and we just react, and we let it overwhelm us, and we just go crazy. And Mike Tyson famously said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And life has a way of punching us in the mouth, and we need to be ready to regulate that, right? And so it does take learning these skills in the alone time, right? And getting to that space. But the problem is when we really need these skills best is in those high stress moments when we are quicker to forget them. And so one of the best things to do when you head into those moments is to pause. Just remember one thing. Right? You got all these other skills. They'll come back to you if you take a moment to pause. Right? They call this the meta moment. It just makes me think of like Facebook or something. But they say pause. There's 4 things here to sense the shift. Right? This is like recognize. Oh, something's changing. I'm getting angry. I'm about to become the Hulk. Whatever it is. Something has changed in me, and I need to pause. Pause. Breathe. They say take that deep breath. This is also a really great moment to say, Holy Spirit, I need you. Right? Pause. Breathe Holy Spirit in. Just be like, nope, can't do this by myself. They say see your best self. Consider what your best self would do. I think what even better, as a Christian, what would Jesus do? Right? We used to all wear those bracelets to remind us of that, and then we forgot what it stood for. We just wore them to be cool. But as a Christian, pause. What would Jesus do here as you breathe it in? Then this is where you're calm, you've paused, and ruler can take effect. Right? Strategize and act. Reach into that toolkit, see where you're at, understand what's going on, and regulate appropriately. Right? The hardest part of all 5 skills of ruler is that it's really nice when we look at it this way in this nice orderly form, but life rarely happens like that. It's just like everything happening at the same time. So you're constantly in different spots of this like thing going through, because you might start expressing something which is going to lead to another emotion. Then you got to start figuring that out too. But again, that's why it's just important to practice it and to work through it. Take your poster and stick it somewhere that you see it. Use it, right? Get your kids to use it. Download that app. I have it. You can set it to pop up and remind you at random times throughout the day to check in with your emotions. And I do one every morning, and then I have it do like a random time later in the day so that I'm not like trying to mind trick it. Like I'm like, oh, it's almost 5 o'clock. Feel good. Nice. I want it to kind of surprise me to see how I'm really doing. But then it also has the 5 skills so that you can walk through those things as well. I'm just about to wrap up, and you guys are like, finally. But have you guys been like, honestly, I just want to know where you guys are at with this series. Has this been helpful? Has it been enjoyable? Okay, thank you. And the cheers were really unnecessary. I really was only asking so I could feel a lot better about myself. What I really want to know is I'm trying to figure out where to go next. We have a lot of things to talk about within this that isn't emotion specific. I have another week minimum of just kind of what to do with all of this stuff and how it applies into real life next week. But I'm debating whether should we take time to dig into like individual emotions and what they mean and how scripturally we should be handling that. We'll be doing one a week, so we have the next 3 years of series left. No, I'm just kidding. We should be able to wrap them together a little bit more, but it will extend this series out quite a bit longer. I am okay with not going there, and that's kind of where I'm leaning. But if that is of interest to you, let me know. If it's just like a few of you, I can definitely recommend some books. But I just wanted to make sure that what we're bringing is serving you guys well and helping you. So does anybody want like the individual emotions? Well, that is not enough people. Okay. Who is just lying? No, it's okay. All right. Well, I'll consider it, I guess. We'll see what we can do. Now, the best part of walking through our emotions, guys, as Christians, is that we have Jesus, we have the Holy Spirit, and we have God, our loving Father. Right? There will be times when you're having real negative feelings, and that's okay. But then Jesus comes and he begins to speak truth. Right? God hugs you with his strong arms to remind you, like, I got this. I can take care of it. The Holy Spirit's fruit begins to fill your life with joy and peace and love, and all the things that you've been struggling with are still there because you're still feeling that way, like in your brain. But you also are feeling the good things of God coming through. And that comfort is okay. Like to live in that cognitive dissonance is hard because we just want to be one or the other. But often things may not feel okay, and God may be there giving you the feelings that it's going to be okay. Right? And we got to learn to live there, right? And be honest when we talk to people that, yes, I'm feeling these things, and that life has not been so great, or these things are going on, but then to not just hide behind the feelings that God is going to take care of you, because we know that as Christians, God's going to be there, but maybe he wants to take care of you through one another here. And if you're not being real and honest, we can't do that. And maybe you're here and you're like, I've just been going through life without God. And I see today that I really want to invite him into my life. Right? I'm going to pray in just a moment. And during that time, just tell God that you believe that he sent his son to die for you. Right? That he rose to life 3 days later so that you can experience life and life to the fullness. If you choose to believe in him. That's all it takes. So if that's you and you want to be there, then just pray that prayer as I'm praying. God, we just thank you so much for the way that you made us, God, that even though I'm really feeling that was so wonderfully complex that David prayed about when saying to you that though there's so much complexity happening within us, God, that you did it for so many reasons, Lord. God, I'm grateful for emotions that I can express to you, God, and that you express your emotions back to me and that I can understand them and feel my life and live life to fullness, God. God, I pray that you would help us be able to put these skills into our brain, God, and that we'd be able to use them when the moments get tough. God, that you would remind us to pause. If that's the only thing we remember today is to pause before responding to things, God. Help us to be good listeners to one another. Help us to be vulnerable and be able to express what's going on inside of us to one another so that we can be the body and care for each other, to rejoice with one another, to weep with one another, God. God, don't let emotions control us, God, but help us to use them as tools to just guide us in life and to keep us on the path that you have for us, Lord. God, we love you so much. We're so grateful for everything you've done for us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, remember, change comes from within, and go and ruler your emotions today. And we have our annual meeting happening right here, so if you didn't listen to me enough this morning, we'll get some more.